everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. In the last video we had this thing up in the air and we went over the chassis and figured out what we need to get our new chassis rolling and ready to go. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to push this thing outside and go with the loader and bring the engine and transmission over here, and we're going to start figuring out what we've got, if it's any good. We'll maybe test fit it in the car and see if we're in the ballpark, if we've got manifolds that'll work, or if those headers we got will work. And just kind of figure out, try and fit a radiator into it, so then I can go ahead and order all the parts for the power plant and drive line, you know. So let's get started. Well, here it is in all its glory. So far, I don't know what year it is. I don't know anything about it. I'm going to have to do a little reading and find out if there's any numbers that should be on this thing and where they might be. You can see here it's got the faraway power steering pump on it. That's for a truck or a van. And maybe that's because it's got the lower rad hose on this side. I'm not sure. I might go and pull the power steering pump off of the car and see if I can fit it on here around this hose. Time will tell. We'll figure it out. The first clues I see is that it's got a mechanical fuel pump and an old-fashioned vacuum advanced distributor. So I would guess this is anywhere from the mid-70s to the early 80s. Maybe a little later into the 80s, 85, 86, if it was out of a 3/4 ton truck, because they were the kind of the last ones to get the emission stuff and the fuel injection and all that business. So we're just gonna kind of have a look at it here and see what we can figure out. Well, I checked. It's got oil in it. I took the lifting plate off. There doesn't seem to be any junk in the intake manifold. It's nice and clean in there. So what we're going to do, I got a battery here. It's got a starter on it. Let's see if it'll turn over. And then maybe we can, we'll pull the plugs out, squirt some oil in it, and give it a compression test. Should be turning, but it's not. Probably got a bad connection somewhere. Hang on. Okay, so now we got some good connections. Let's see what happens. Wow, would you look at that? She turns. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll go around, I'll pull all the plugs out, and we'll squirt some oil in it, turn it over a little bit more. Just kind of let it get loosened up a little bit, and then we'll get out the compression gauge. I took the plugs out, and they all look fine. I shot just a little bit of light oil just to wet the cylinders a little bit. And now we're going to turn it over with the plugs out and see how it sounds. That's pretty good. Get that oil worked in. Okay, now we're going to get out the compression gauge. Here we go. We'll do the left bank first. I think on Fords that's the even number cylinders. So that will be number 2. Let's see what we get out of it. 4, 5, 6. Sounded pretty good. Yeah, look at that. 150. Good. Well, so far so good. We got 150 on number 2 here. So I'll just mark it down there. And we'll continue down the left bank and we'll see what we've got. And repeat. $165. $170 maybe even. We'll call it 165. All right, let me do the other 2. I'll be right back. And there we are. That's the result from this side. So that is darn good. Okay, I think what we can do at this point is assume that it's okay. That's great compression. And what we're going to do is kind of strip it down, get the transmission off, get it on an engine stand, and we'll get a little deeper into it and see what we've got. You can see there's a decent amount of slop in the timing chain, so we'll get a timing set for it. Some gaskets. We're going to need, when we change it to a front sump oil pan to fit the car, we're going to need a dipstick and a tube, so we'll have to source that. I better start making a list, eh? So I've got it mostly cleaned off now, and we've got the torque converter undone and the bell housing bolts pulled out, and the transmission just slid back a bit. Next thing is to grab the engine with the crane and get it lifted up and on the stand, and then we'll stick the transmission in a corner somewhere. Well, here's a clue, eh? Once we got this out, 85 Ford van, 351 Windsor. That's yellow markings from a boneyard. So I don't know if those markings were because somebody bought the flex plate or if that's what the engine is out of. Hard to say. We'll learn more as we go. You can see the black paint job on the torque converter, so I would say this transmission has definitely been in a transmission shop at some point and been overhauled. We'll learn more about it when we get into it, right? Transmissions are always, you never know what you've got till you open them up. And you can see here we've got one odd bolt. Man, it's always something. That I'm going to have to do something about that because that will drive me bonkers. All right, that's good. So I'm going to go ahead now and man, the sun is shining in that door. There we go. I'm going to go ahead now and get the oil draining out of it. And then we can start getting some of the other stuff we don't need. The oil filter, those motor mounts are for a truck or a van. They can go. And we can slowly start getting into it. We'll get the oil pan down, get the front cover off, valve covers, intake manifold, distributor, all that stuff out. And then we'll get a really good idea of what we've got. Oh, the oil is out. No water came out of it, so that's good. Now I've pulled the balancer off. So now we're going to work at, next thing, I want to get the oil pan dropped down and get the front cover pulled off of this thing. And then we'll have a really good idea what we've got. You can see here we've got a broken bolt here we'll have to get out. No problem. It's pretty common on these Fords. Oh, maybe not. No, you know what? It wasn't a broken bolt. There's just junk in the hole. Oh, thank goodness. That's even easier. Well, that looks pretty good. There's no junk or sludge or anything in the oil pan. Really happy to see that. Doesn't even smell too bad. So now we'll go ahead and get the front cover off and see what's in there. Well, you can see here, we're definitely going to be wanting to put a timing chain in this thing. And I wanted to see what style we had. So this is the later style with the two-piece fuel pump eccentric. It's no big deal. It just adds kind of like a bearing surface. It takes away some of the friction. A lot of guys will take this off and switch to the early solid style. For me, I think I may have an old solid style eccentric. So whatever timing chain set is cheapest, that's what we'll go with. Got it. First I got it turning back and forth a tiny bit, so I knew it was free. And then I got up under here. You see this here? That's a pretty strong part of the casting. And I got on there with a long punch and just started tapping on it. And she finally started moving. And out it comes. We'll get that all cleaned up and anti-seized. So it's never a problem ever again. Now we're going to get these valve covers off. I got the valve covers off, and you could see how clean this thing is inside. There's no sludge, no nothing. It's very nice. And we can also see that yesterday when we were winding it over doing our compression tests and such, you could see it was pumping oil up to the top end. That's good. That's awesome. So now we're going to go ahead, get all these bolts out, and pull this intake manifold off and see what it looks like down in the valley. Another fun thing on these Windsor motors with any kind of aluminum intake manifold, factory otherwise, these two front bolts, for the same reasons as the distributor, we were put quite a bit of heat into here. Not with the big torch, with the MAP gas little torch. And finally, we got it loose. But look at all the stuff here. That's all that crap that came out of this hole. You'll quite often just have to break these things to get the manifold off. And the clean theme continues in here. This engine, what? It's a beauty, man. It's spotless. I'm debating whether or not to pull the camshaft out of it because I want to get this thing out. Number one, I want to see if it's got the stock cam in it because this engine's obviously been apart before. There's no way it's this clean from original. And with it having the Edelbrock intake on it, there's a possibility that when they built it, they put a camshaft in it. But, you know, you kind of think if they did that, they would have put a double roller chain on it, which, well, obviously they didn't. So, at any rate, we'll see. I'm going to sit down and think about it. I need so many gaskets. It's actually cheaper at this point to buy a complete gasket set. And at that point, once you buy a complete gasket set, now you've got head gaskets, right? So we can pull the heads off of this thing. That way that we'll have a chance to look at everything, clean it. I can power wash it all with the camshaft and everything out. And then we can put it together nice and clean, you know? Plus it gives us a chance to have a look at the bores, see what the pistons are, you know? It's probably just the best idea. I put the timing set back on because I wanted to see what it had in it for a camshaft. So I took a rocker and a push rod off. This thing has basically a square cam. It's 270 duration, 269 lift at the lobe, which through the rocker ratio works out to 416 lift at the valve. So I unscientifically took this rocker off and measured it off the end of the push rod here. And I got, 267 thou. So that's close enough to 269. So it's got just a stock broomstick cam in it. But that's fine. It'll have lots of vacuum. It'll be good on fuel. It'll run smooth. It'll move the car down the road. We'll put the 4-barrel on it and some decent exhaust, and it'll be a nice running car. The next thing I want to do is flip it over because of the numbers for the block are underneath here. So it's easier to flip it over to look at them. And the water jackets were still full, you know, up to here with coolant. So we took the plugs out, the block plugs out, and drained it. This one, no problem. They're a quarter pipe plug with you take out with an Allen key, right? Quarter-inch Allen key. This one stuck the socket in, boop, out it came. The other one, no way. It looked like somebody had been at it before. It was all rounded out. So it was all right. I just drilled it out and stuck an extractor in it, and it came right out. All right, so we've got it flipped over, and I'll show you a few things we see. Number one, there's some real shiny looking pistons down in there. That would indicate that somebody's probably been in there ahead of us. The casting number on the block is D4AE. That makes it, all that means D is 1970s, the decade, and 4 is 74. So that doesn't mean this is a 1974 block. It means this casting was first used in 1974. And this casting number, this D4AE 351 block, actually went from 1974 until 1978. Then in 79, they came up with new castings, and there's actually different prefixes for cars and trucks. I don't know what the difference is. I'm not a Ford aficionado. Unfortunately, the actual hot pour date code, it's just illegible. The salt has done a number on it. But that casting number will fit in with what we'll show you when we get back to the top side. So another thing I did, we managed to get our caliper here around the skirt of this piston that's at bottom dead center. And you can see here the piston is 4.028. And these 351s are a 4-inch bore, just like a 302. So that tells us that this thing is 30 over. So it's been bored for sure. It's 30 over. So here's what we found. You can see the mains. It's just taking the coating off, but wear is wear. So we'll put a set of main bearings in it. And the rod bearings, you can pull the cap off, but you can't see the wear there because the rod bearing is pushing down on the crank. Anywhere on the rod bearing is going to be on the top half of the shell. And you can see here kind of the same thing going on with the rod bearings. It's easy enough to do this. I've done it before. I am not touching the pistons or the bores because after doing the compression test, everything was between 160 and 180. There's no evidence of it pumping oil on the plugs. I'm not touching the bores or the rings. But we are going to put rod and main bearings in it while we're at it. While we're in here. It only makes sense. It's got a melling oil pump on it, an M83, which is just a standard volume replacement melling pump. If they would have had the fully grooved main bearings in this thing, you would expect to see a high volume pump. But this is fine for half groove. It's A-okay. I kind of wonder if this engine was, because of the wear on the bearings, but not really beat up, you know, there's no gouges, there's no evidence of the engine eating itself. This was probably in a truck that was doing some work, you know, maybe pulling a trailer or something. No worries at all. So here's what I've figured out about this thing. The block, we know by the casting number, it's a 74 to 78 block. The heads, where's the casting dates on these? I looked at them yesterday. 6D27. So this head was cast on the 6th of April, or pardon me, 1976, April 27th. And this one was cast 1976, April 15th. The timing cover has D7AE engineering code. That makes this a new for 1977 cover. And the tag on our distributor is D6UE. So that's also first year used, 1976. So I don't find any engineering codes newer than 1977 on this engine. So I'm going to declare that it's a 1977 engine. And by the lack of rotators on the exhaust valves, we can also determine that it was probably a passenger car engine, as truck engines would usually have the big rotators on the exhaust valves. So I'm guessing this is a 1977 car engine, although at some point it was converted to be used in a truck. The oil pan and the motor mounts and stuff. It's been in a truck. It hasn't been in a car. And the C6 transmission that was bolted to it says it was more than likely in a car, because it's very few cars in that smog 70s era got a small block engine and a C6 transmission. Mostly behind these you would see FMX, sometimes C4s. But that's cool. Parts are ordered. I've got to order a couple more bits now. Now that I've decided I want to roll some bearings into it, we'll get that stuff. The oil pump is fine. There's no evidence of it ever starving for oil or being overheated or anything like that. It all looks good. So I think we're all set. And I got lots and lots of gross old parts to clean up. And as far as this thing goes, I have no idea what year it is, because the tag that is supposed to be on this bolt here is gone. so we don't know what it is. I can only assume that because the outside of it's painted, the torque converter is painted when they never were from the factory, that this transmission has been in a transmission shop and being rebuilt. So that being said, I've gone out on a bit of a limb, and the only things I've really ordered for the transmission are a converter seal, an output seal, a filter kit, and a shift kit. Not really like a break your neck kind of shift kit. It's just the ones that Transgo sells that just kind of corrects a few little factory things. You change 4 or 5 springs and drill a couple of holes. It doesn't really make it into a race transmission or anything like that. It just kind of cleans it up. So we'll do that. And then once I'm inside it, I have to start looking for engineering codes on some of the parts in the valve body to try and determine what year this transmission actually is, because 1977 is a changeover year. If it is 1977, like the engine, that is the first year that these things used Dexron Mercon fluid instead of the old Type F Ford fluid. I would like to know that for sure, because if it's a Dexron transmission or a Mercon, sorry, I have to speak Ford here. We're talking about Fords. If it's a Mercon transmission, well, that stuff's a heck of a lot cheaper than the old Type F, right? Type F, I can't buy it in bulk. I got to buy it in these little 1 liter things, and they're like $8 a piece. And well, you buy 6 or 7 of them, and it's getting, into $60 plus tax, blah, blah, blah. So the Dex Merc is definitely the fluid we would like to be able to use in this, if it's the right year. So if it's 77 or newer, we can use the Dex Merc fluid in it. Like I said, we'll find out when we get in, and I'm not too worried about that for now. Now what I'm going to do, because I bought a complete gasket set, it was cheaper than buying the gaskets I needed individually. We've got a complete gasket set. So I'm going to go ahead and take the cylinder heads off so we can see what we've got in there. I'm pretty sure I know what pistons are in it, but let's make sure. And I want to see what this thing has got in it for valves. There is some debate. This is a kind of this engine is kind of in a vague era of what valves and stuff you could possibly have in these 351s. So, you know what? It's better. We've got the parts. Let's take it apart and know what we've got. First, I'm going to get the rockers and the push rods out. And we don't have to worry about segregating them as to what cylinder they came off. It's all just production stuff. It's all the same. It can go back any old which way. It's no big deal. Now we're going to remove the heads. And you just start at the ends and you kind of go like that in a decreasing spiral and work your way into the center. So we got these guys off. They're C5AE, or pardon me, they're D5AE, so that means they were first used in 1975. These are what guys will call kind of the last real 351 heads before they just basically started using 302 heads with bigger bolt holes in them. But these so they've got the larger, they've got the larger intake ports, 351 size, but they use 302 size valves. That was done for emissions apparently. It's no big deal. You can send them to a machine shop and have the early 351 valves put in them. But for what we're doing, this is fine. It'll move the car down the road. And that's about all we know about those. They look pretty decent. You don't see any recession on the exhaust valves. They're all out where they should be. So that's good. We'll just clean them up and put them back on. With the heads off, we could see the bores look just fine. Everything seems okay in there. No evidence of it being oiled or filled with coolant. We do know we did a compression test. Remember, it had lots of compression, so we'll leave the bores alone. All I've got left to do now is get a piece of wood, drill 16 holes in it so I can pull the lifters out to keep them in order. That's important. Unlike the push rods and rockers, we need to keep the lifters in order for when we put it back together. And we could go ahead and start getting this thing cleaned up. And that'll be in the next video. We'll start getting it cleaned up and put back together. So we've come to the end of this video, and I'm going to update you on the financials of it. So we got back in the winter, we got the drive shaft and some bits and pieces at the wreckers. That was $104. Coolant, $30. I got some stuff from Summit Racing that was we'll call it $88. 2 orders from Rock Auto. You could see 117 and 200. Gear oil, I just took it out of, I keep some stuff, gear oil and stuff in bulk. So I know what I paid for it. So I calculate what I've taken out. That's what we'll need for this project. $20 pretty much. Motor oil, same thing, $16 because I had some 2050 motor oil that I bought at the auction. Good enough. More Rock Auto, $96.60. I had to buy a set of main bearings. I couldn't get them anywhere. I bought them on eBay. It was $68. And then we have what here we call currency correction or the credit card extortion fee. So when I order stuff like from Rock Auto or Summit or whatever, they convert what I owe them to Canadian money, and that's what it shows here. Unfortunately, the credit card likes to skim a little bit off the top of that, which always adds to it. So over the course from here to here, that's the correction, $44 to the credit card people. Whatever, it is what it is. And I made a mistake somewhere up above, so I got a credit of 83 cents. That brings us now to $4,022.56. So we have crossed the $4,000 barrier, and that puts us into kind of the red zone now. Since I started, I came up with this plan when I first got this car late last summer. I had no idea the effect that the out-of-control inflation and fuel prices would have on this. The parts that I've been buying from Rock Auto and that, they're literally costing me 25 and 30% more than back when I came up with this idea. So that's putting a real dent in it. And the cost of fuel has gone through the roof. And that's adding quite a bit to the shipping charges. But hey, all we could do is keep forging ahead and see what happens. I'm still hoping, fingers crossed, I could bring it in under budget like I want to. But if I don't, I don't. It'll be right around there somewhere. So keep your fingers crossed for me. All right, that'll do it for that one. We've been inside the engine. We know what we've got now. Don't see any real problems with it. We'll just clean it up, reseal it, put it back together, and it'll be good to go. The transmission, I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay. I'll know more when I pull the pan down from it, and if I see any junk in there, then we'll have to open it up. But fingers crossed, the transmission's going to be okay, and that won't suck anything else out of our budget. Anyway, I'm going to go now. I would like to thank you for tuning into our little channel. Hope you're enjoying this crazy project that we've dreamed up. And until we meet again, I'm Kevin saying so long from the Claremont Classic Garage.